What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're going to talk about Will and Harper. It's a new documentary that is on Netflix, and it has audio description created by Diffuse. And it's a documentary about Will Ferrell and his transitioning friend Harper. And that is basically the documentary, is that Will Ferrell starts out explaining how he had a friend who at the time was he knew as a male that was a head writer for Saturday Night Live that helped create many of his iconic sketches from back in the day. And he also continued to work with outside of Saturday Night Live. And they've been, best friends for years. And then during the pandemic, when people weren't necessarily making a lot of human contact, he got an email from his friend saying that I've made this decision to start living openly as a woman, and Will is trying to figure out how to be the most supportive friend that he can be, and using this as an opportunity to try to explore this in a way so that people can see it. Almost like using, I don't want to say he exploits his best friend, but it's a little bit like that. I think Harper knows what's going on, so oftentimes people who are being exploited don't know. So, but he comes up with an idea about doing this road trip movie where, because Harper's worried about going out in public and going to certain places, and expresses fear of, doing the things that she used to like to do. And Will's like, well, what if I went with you? What if we did this road trip? So they go out on this 16-day road trip, and they drive all over America and stop in at these random places. And of course, they stop in a lot of like red state places, right? They go through middle America where there aren't a lot of transgender people. And they go to like a basketball game in Indiana, and that becomes sort of like oddly setting, the Twitter aflame with people who are hating on his transgender friend. And there are a lot of sort of really impactful moments. Will Forte also pops up in this, by the way, and they do go visit the home of Saturday Night Live, since they both worked for Saturday Night Live. Obviously, Will Ferrell worked for Saturday Night Live, but in case you're wondering where Harper Steele worked, it was Saturday Night Live. And I think probably the most interesting conversation is with Harper's kids, who still see her as dad, and still use dad, and she still wants them to use dad, but with like she, her pronouns. I think that's interesting. Personally, for me, out of everything in this film, because I know transgender people have an uphill battle. I have transgender friends, so I know what that's like, and I think I get what Will's trying to do here, because it's always like trying to navigate and make sure that how, what is this going forward? How can I help? How do I support correctly? You want to make sure you get it right, and there isn't like a guidebook. There's just sort of like I'm going to fuck this up. So, and if anybody's going to fuck it up, it's probably going to be somebody like Will Ferrell, who's definitely, in some joke going to make something, you know what I'm saying? And then realize, oh shit, that joke was transphobic, which is something that Will Ferrell has done as playing Janet Reno, which he's apologized for. Now, in retrospect, having this experience, um, he realizes sort of retroactively what that looks like and what it looked like and what it felt like and what maybe it felt made other people feel like. I thought about that too. And Saturday Night Live has a history of having people playing genders that are not their own. Um, but at the same time, I don't think all those cast members would apologize for it. And Kate McKinnon played plenty of characters that were male. So I don't think she would apologize for it. Was the intent of the joke of the Janet Reno thing? Absolutely. But Janet Reno also was not transgender. So um it was more of a joke of how she looked unattractive, was to put it that way. And um I think there's always something even behind some of the other people when they do it. So he wasn't necessarily mocking transgenderness, because then I would question whether or not Kate McKinnon, when she does it the other way, how is she affecting? You know what I'm saying? Because she's using that opportunity to dress up as a man. So what is that saying about it? And how does Kate McKinnon feel about that? So a question that has been broached. But anyway, I think Will this is a weird documentary. Like, it's fine for what it is. It's two friends on a road trip. And it does try to tackle the actual, how the world sort of just hates transgender people for whatever reason. I don't know, because we can't, I love the people who are like, let me live my life, but they then won't let other people live theirs. Great. Like, don't take away my guns, but you can't, you can't be transgender. It's like, that transitioning is not going to hurt anybody, but your gun might. Just food for thought on that. So yeah, Will and Harper is a privileged documentary that gets to be made because of Will Ferrell. I think his heart is in some place. It's in the right place, maybe. I do think that he and Harper are friends, and come across that way. And I think Harper is 100% comfortable with this and knows exactly what she's getting herself into. So I don't think it's exploitative of Harper. And it gives Harper an opportunity to talk about her transition. So it's like a personal experience for her. I don't know that she speaks for the entire transgender community. She talks about the choices that she's making in her transition, and what kind of surgery does she plan on taking? And obviously that's gonna be different for everybody. So, and she recognizes that and says something about how, well, she's old and she's not really worried about her sex life and that kind of thing. But she just wanted to be able to finally identify as who she's always felt like since she was a kid. They meet rather welcoming people most of the time in this. Like, pretty much everybody is chill. And a lot of that is because even if you put Harper coming into a room as Harper, and when Harper gets misgendered, then comes Will Ferrell. And regardless of party affiliation or wherever you line up, everybody seems to be really down to see Will Ferrell. I mean, they'll troll him online, but that's about it. Everybody, like, in person is just like, oh my God, is that Will Ferrell? I mean, everybody. So it's one of these things where it's like, if the goal is to send somebody in there as an ambassador, he almost immediately changes the conversation. because he's so instantly recognizable to everyone as Will Ferrell. Uh, so it's an odd night. I liked it, but I kind of like I don't need it to be nominated for an Oscar. I'm fine with that. But I liked it for what it was. And I was thinking, like, well, what if Will wasn't famous? What if this was a guy who was interested in making a movie and decided to make a movie about his transgender friend? Or, and I even took this like personally, I was like, what if me, since I'm sort of newish to blindness, what if I had, because I do have filmmaker friends, what if one of them was like, you know what? I'd love to know what this is like, and let's explore your blindness and go on a road trip. I'd be like, I think the concept works because when you're out on the road with somebody, it's just the two of you, it allows for open dialogue. And if you really are that close to somebody and you're able to talk to somebody, maybe you want to talk to somebody about it, I think a lot of times in the trepidation of, I can't speak as a trans person, I can only just as a gay film critic or blind or whatever. The reality is that you're worried about like losing people along the way. And I certainly felt that when my blindness started making people uncomfortable and I stopped seeing certain people. It's weird and it's a real thing, but yeah, and people just suddenly they don't want to have contact with you. And it's like, I just went blind, man. Like, I'm sorry that makes you uncomfortable, but I'm not trying to have you come over and clean my house, like, I just don't want that. So I know the fear is the same thing when you come out is, will I have these friends? Will I still have them after? And I think that's what Harper's going through is, so I'm going to say this and who's going to still be standing. I think it's great that her family was as supportive as they were. And Harper makes it really clear that the whole dad thing is like her choice, and that she doesn't want that to change. She doesn't want to change her kids' dynamic of how they relate to mom and dad. So that's the one like pronoun-ish. It's not a pronoun, but identification tool that doesn't change is that like her kids get to still call her dad. It's an interesting individual exploration of Harper that Will Ferrell happens to be there for, because nobody would watch a Harper film because nobody knows who Harper is. Will could have made a film about Harper without being in it. Less people would watch it. But he absolutely has that kind of clout and the money to make that happen. And could have just let Harper go on a road trip by herself. But I don't know that would have been as fun for Harper. I think Harper's having genuine fun and there's something to be said for having that support when you do have trepidation in going in somewhere. I have trepidation in going in some places, and it's nice to have a sighted person sometimes. It's the best way I can equate to it. And blindness and transness are not the same thing, but so I'm not trying to offend the trans community. But what I'll say is, when Harper has a hard time going in some places, it's like I have a hard time going in some places. Like, I live in an area where, yeah, there are plenty of places I've been before and plenty of places I've been in before, and I'm a lot more comfortable in those places. Take me in a place I've never been before, and I'm like, I feel better when I'm with someone else. So that's just how it is. I mean, if I walk into a building I've never been in before, like, I don't even conceptually understand the layout. I don't, I'm like, the fuck do I go? Like, am I going to walk into, because a lot of places are not necessarily made for blind people to move through them, or people are looking out for you or whatever. So sometimes a sighted human being next to you isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, I've walked into too many people who, you know, I don't know, don't see my cane and like all sorts of things. And it's like, I get that, you know, and it does, and it raises my sort of anxiety level and all that kind of thing. Um, and if that helped Harper on her journey, then I think that's valuable. As a movie, if it helps anybody, then it's valuable. So if anybody watches this and they're like, I relate to this, it helps me, or from either way, whether you're transgender and there's something that you see in Harper that relates to you, or if you have a friend who is transgender and has um and you're like, I don't know what to do, you know, I don't know how to like, do I ask questions, can I ask questions, should I ask questions, like all those things. Just the other day, actually, I was talking to a trans friend of mine who, I was joking because I hadn't seen them in a while, and I was like, I don't even know what your name is right now, because, and that sounds terrible, but she actually had changed her name a couple times. Like, she was exploring, going through different options on socials, and so I actually got a chance to see her in person. I was like, I don't even know what your name is right now. And she laughed and she was like, I know I keep changing it, but now it's official, and it's actually, I went through the whole process of changing and putting it down, and actually, you know, so I can't change it back. I can't change it again. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is the name that you're going to be using. So, but yeah, I realized, I was like, I don't even know. Because without it's not like I can uh, I can't use the, uh, when she changed her name on Facebook, I'm like, who's this person that's on is this the same, you know, because I don't see profile pictures. So for me, it's like, there's nothing that I can recognize. So it's just very weird for me. And I'm like, how did this person sneak in? Who is this person? You know, I start looking at my feed, and I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. How does this person get on my list? So I think I've unfriended them, and I need to refriend them. And it gets me in this whole thing. But it's one of those conversations that is so unique to this experience. But it doesn't make anybody transphobic or anything like that. It's not a bad conversation to have. I think it's an interesting conversation. So I think that's what Will's going through, but he doesn't need to go through anything. It's not his transition. um, it's an odd duck of a documentary. I'm sort of glad that it's there, because the way that our country looks at the transgender community right now is seven kinds of fucked. Just we just I don't know. We've decided to use them as like a political tool to try to. Uh, I I don't know. I don't like anything that's happening with the politicizing of the transgender community, and the people who are like, well, let's just wipe them out. Let's get rid of them. They don't get no rights and no bathrooms, and like they just want to like live life like a normal one. It's, you know, I understand that for people who don't understand things, who can't equate and outside the box and put themselves in the mind of somebody else, that it all seems really foreign. And so maybe something like Will and Harper, that they may check out, as somebody may check out because they don't know what it is, and like, oh, Will Ferrell's in this, maybe it'll work. Maybe that's what the benefit is. So I'm not going to totally hate on Will and Harper, but and I haven't checked out anybody else's opinion on this. I was thinking about that. I was like, well, I'm a member of GALECA. I could do like a little test and be like, so how did we feel about? But I'm not going to do that because um I don't know, the documentary is made for me anyway. It's I'm not trans, so There's Will, who's not trans, and Harper, who is, and those are the two things. And Harper's the one that's going through transition. So you're going to have two sets of opinions on this. You're going to have people who are not trans speaking about it, and you're going to have people who are trans speaking about it. So I can't speak from the trans perspective. It will never be my perspective because it's not who I am. Just like I can't speak from like a Black perspective. I can kind of imagine what that would be like I can for a transgender person, and try to empathize and project that into my review. But that's as far as that goes. So I think there's value in this, but I hope there's value in it anyway. So I hope that this is worth something to somebody and makes a positive impact in the world. So it reminded me a lot of We're Here, the HBO series that got unceremoniously canceled, sadly. But as far as the audio description goes, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find out it was diffused, because I didn't hate it. And part of it was, I was thinking about this, they spend a lot of time in a car. They do kind of go to these other places. It does directly, like when Will Forte shows up, it just says Will Forte. It doesn't try to like describe Will Forte, which would be so annoying. Just fucking say Will Forte. You know what I'm saying? Like, thank God. Thank you so much. But for the most part, it doesn't really describe Will Ferrell, but it doesn't need to. I think most people have like a passing knowledge of who Will Ferrell is as a human being. And so what they do is they describe sort of like changes that Will makes to himself. Like he's wearing a pair of sunglasses while driving a car. Like you'll get that in the audio description. And for Harper, I was a little I was a little trepidatious about how to describe Harper. I'm really glad that I didn't get a lot of description about Harper. It was just sort of like, this is Harper, and Harper is checking out, trying to figure out a dress. Harper's trying to, I don't need to know the, I'm going to call it the passability test. I don't need to know that. That is not, I don't need to get into the whole description of Harper's intimate details about how feminine or not feminine Harper looks. That's not important. Harper is that doesn't change Harper's pronouns. That doesn't change who Harper is. There are plenty of women who look how they look, can't change how they look, and are not trans, and I'm sure get plenty of shit for the way that they look. So I'm glad that we didn't try to go down that route of, like, well, just how trans is Harper, and just kind of describe, and you just accept that Harper is Harper, and Harper's going to do things. Great. I'm glad we didn't over-describe Harper. I feel like somebody else would have tried to over-describe Harper, and I feel like that could have opened up the wrong doors. So I'm glad we didn't do that. If that makes any sense. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's sort of like I talked about before with audio description. When we do biopics, a lot of it is, well, do they look like the celebrity? How much do they look like? And that becomes something that the sighted audience is weighing against. And I feel like the sighted audience, if we're being really honest, comes into this and they go, so does Harper look like a woman, or does Harper look like a man? I feel like that's what they're thinking, and I don't need to know that. And nobody really should want to know that or need to know that. That's not really the point of this documentary, is to be judging how, like, what version of, female Harper looks like to you. Would that make you more comfortable if she looked, if if Will went to go meet his friend Harper and somebody who looks like Bo Derek came out and just was like, hey, what's up? I'm Bo, I'm Harper, Is that gonna make you feel more comfortable? Like, at what level does your comfort level change? And is this about your comfort level, or is this just about Harper? Because Harper is going to look like Harper and is not going to, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's only just so much Harper's going to be able to do to change who that is. So I'm glad we didn't get into that. And uh, because I feel like that's exactly what sighted audiences are thinking. Uh, Not all of them, obviously. Some people are just like, what the fuck ever. I'm more in that page. um, But yeah, I'm glad that that wasn't on the table. So that there wasn't this like, what is this? So I think Diffuse actually made a good track, which is rare, and I they bounced around from location to location. I kind of always knew what kind of location we were in. Who could have been more immersive? I don't know, maybe. But then they're bumping into people who they bump into like for like a fraction of a time. Like, so how much do I need a description of some dude who just makes a comment somewhere to them? Like, I don't need like a full blown description of that person who just makes like a comment and then like leaves, or there's just certain things where it's like, yeah, I just didn't need to know that. So I think it's a pretty solid track. It didn't strike me as something that I was like, let's give it audio description awards. But the fact that I wasn't having any problems with it, I thought the narrator choice was fine. I thought about like representation and audio description. Like, would I have hired a transgender person to play this, to do the audio description? I think if I knew one, if I was Diffuse and I had somebody who was trans, I probably would have. But I don't know, because you could go either way with that. So you could have somebody who's trans either way. And do you choose somebody who's transitioning the other direction, that away from Harper, like male, like female to male transition? Or would you make it so that it specifically lines up with Harper? I don't know, but that was really the only thought I had about narrator choice, but I didn't have it. I thought the narrator did a fine job. So I don't know how many transgender narrators there are to be able to fill that void. I'm unaware of that existence. So until I have those statistics, I don't want to push too hard and say, because if there's one transgender narrator and they're not really good, then maybe they need to get better. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to just say, well, you have to hire. I'm thinking of all of the talent that I know, and I'm unaware of anybody who is. So because I don't know one, and I've listened to a lot of audio description, and I know some personally, I don't know anybody who is. So I don't have that hole to plug. Whereas for a lot of the other things, when I bring it up, when I go, well, this should have a Black narrator, a Latino narrator, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know people who are those things. So I can easily say that. Here, I don't know the answer to that question. But should you watch Will and Harper? I think probably everybody should watch Will and Harper. Everybody's gonna have a different experience with it, but I liked it. I don't know that it needs an Oscar, but I would be fine with this being left off the short list. I think some people are going to be like, well, it's a high profile documentary. It says something important. It kind of says some important stuff about transgenderness, but it's really more about Harper's personal journey than it is anything else. And Will Ferrell is this looming presence over a lot of it. So it's not necessarily the champion documentary that it could be, but I don't have a problem with it. So I'm going to give Will and Harper an A minus, but I'm very interested to know what other people's opinions are, especially those from the trans community. But that's it. That's what I got on Will and Harper. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.